It was Vladimir Lenin, founder of the Russian Communist Party, who famously said, "Give me just one generation of youth and I'll transform the world." You know, it's always been about the youth. Have you ever noticed how the entertainment industry targets the youth? You know, almost exclusively in a lot of areas. And from the Beatles all the way to Post Malone, it's always had the same effect. These famous adult celebrities stand elevated on stages before tens of thousands of screaming teenagers, and they're worshipped like gods. You know, and what is the root word of celebrity? Celeb, you know, as in to celebrate. They are celebrated people. Let me say that again, celebrated people. These people that you're looking at right now, at least according to our society, are supposed to be respected and admired. But here's an important distinction. These people are not on these stages because the world celebrates them. No, it's that the world celebrates them because they're the people that are on the stage. And you know, as far as the kids are concerned, all they want to do is just fit in and be accepted. You know, they're not creating this culture. No, the attitudes and behaviors that we see demonstrated by the youth is actually just a direct reflection of the influence that this trash has had on them. And while it is true that it's the parents who bear the responsibility to protect their children from these terrible influences, in these last days, it's becoming increasingly more difficult to shelter your children from this propaganda. I mean, the bus driver will be playing this music as they drive to school. The bus will then pass by numerous billboards, you know, and advertisements promoting sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And then at school, all the kids are going to be talking about it. And then the school is going to send your kid home with a whole bunch of homework to do so that they're too busy to spend any quality time with you. And so now, instead of your child learning the values and knowledge that you might regard as important throughout the week, he or she will instead be subjected to the state-approved curriculum, you know, at a government-funded building that a big school bus will literally drive them to, which might include things like, "Hey kids, did you know that you could buy condoms at any age?" Or, "Did you know that you don't need your parents' permission to have an abortion?" And so even at school, the teachers are just regurgitating this same narrative that the kids are already hearing from their favorite pop stars, you know, and on YouTube and their favorite cartoons and TV programs and the whole entertainment industry. And so when will you people realize that this whole system is working in concert against God and against you? It's becoming inescapable. And I keep thinking about this new normal that we keep hearing about. And I gotta say, as a guy with a pretty fair balance of conservative and liberal friends, nobody likes this new normal stuff. But that doesn't really matter to the ruling class because they know that they can't teach an old dog new tricks, you know? And besides, we're all gonna die off within the next 50 years anyways. No, it's the youth. The new normal is for the youth, you know, because they grew up in these conditions, so they're used to it. They're gonna be used to it. This world is all they've known. And that's the type of society that the ruling class really needs to fully push this agenda forward. Because 20 years from now, when the kids of today are the ones in charge and running things, and President Biden and President Trump are long gone, all this insane stuff that we're going through right now will just be another chapter in the history books. But all of the changes that have been made, and the restrictions that have been imposed, and the laws that have been passed, these things will remain. And so it's not hyperbole to say that they are coming for the kids. And not only are they coming for your kids, but they're doing this right inside of your own living room, you know, because whatever you're doing, despite the virtues and values that you're attempting to instill into your children, you know, we got to just accept and understand what we're up against here. Because the reality is that the youth of today have inherited a world that surrounds them with digital screens that just constantly broadcast and push propaganda on them. You know, and all this propaganda is dressed up and disguised as popular trends and what's cool and what's hip, you know, so the kids go along with it to be accepted. And so, yeah, they really are targeting your kids. I guess the question is, who's going to stand in their way? And we all know the formula. I mean, we've seen it for years because it's the very same formula that has already been used for the past few generations. And the formula is that you use celebrated people or celebrities to indoctrinate the kids, to work as mouthpieces for the people that are actually behind the agenda. Because if people like Ted Turner, and Bill Gates and George Soros were to try to get on a stage and influence the youth, that wouldn't work. So instead they speak their messages through the mouths of these attractive and talented young celebrities. That's who they put on the stages. That's who the kids respond to. And they continue to use this approach, because it works. Because every machine shop that I've worked at over the last decade has been filled with a bunch of old dudes that are still just listening to all their favorite classic rock songs on repeat, and they talk about the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and Leonard Skinner. And even pushing the age of 50 or 60, these guys are still enchanted by these bands that influenced them back when they were young, In fact, I remember watching Joe Schimmel's classic expose on the music industry called They Sold Their Souls for Rock and Roll. And I remember hearing some guy make the statement that back in the 60s, whenever the members of the Beatles would adopt a new hairstyle, it would immediately become like the new style for the youth. And everybody in the streets would suddenly be rocking that same style. Actually, I'll just find that clip.
I grew up with them. They helped us grow up. They got me arrested 3 or 4 times.
I think they did a lot for society.
Those songs are in my memory banks I think they're actually my genetic material.
All-time favorite musical group?
Beatles.
If they dressed a certain way, everybody wanted to be like that.
When the Beatles got long hair, I got long hair. The fact that my mother didn't like it was an enormous part of its appeal.
And so this is a classic model of indoctrination. It's the gradual degradation. I mean, you're probably familiar with the history that when Elvis Presley was popular, there was a major controversy over whether television stations should be permitted to show his dance moves, which were apparently deemed to be sexually inappropriate because he would gyrate his hips, And you fast forward 10 years and now there's songs on the radio with lyrics that are describing sex and drugs. But back then they would still have to kind of veil it in some form of poetry. But by the 90s, almost all the popular songs were explicitly about sex and drugs, or just about being depressed, with most of the stars being suicidal drug addicts. And meanwhile, over in the cities, gangsta rap was taking over the airwaves, and people like Tupac Shakur and Chris Wallace, aka the Notorious B.I.G., and all these other self-serving rap stars were dominating the industry, performing massive shows for sold-out crowds of teenagers who would hang on every obscene words that these clowns had to say. I mean, the influence that this stuff has on our culture is ridiculous. And I know that that's a true statement because I remember the influence that it had on me. And a lot of you might not know this, but I spent almost 2 decades pursuing a career in secular music, with some small successes. That's me there, trying to influence crowds of hundreds with the very same message that had influenced me. But my experience as a struggling music artist is a topic for another video, and I don't want to stray too far from the plot of this series, but I just can't help but to reflect on my own experience with indoctrination and how dramatically my life was affected by it. Because in my generation, it was Eminem and Blink-182 and that whole era of obnoxious music. And I remember idolizing my favorite musicians with a godlike level of respect. I remember seeing this group called Head PE play a show when I was like 15. And I remember admiring the members of the band like they were just so special and so cool. And the singer/rapper guy was decked out in all these flamboyant clothes. And I was just starstruck, by how cool he was. And I jumped around and I pounded my fist in approval as he rapped and sang about not giving an F word, or getting laid and getting wasted. And pretty much all the songs were just arrogant messages about being a selfish idiot, but there I was banging my head, screaming for more. And meanwhile, I had these wonderful parents at home who loved me and who care about me and who invested in my future, and they're telling me all these things to beware of and virtues to adopt and all the morals and actual wisdom that a child needs, and they're teaching me from the Bible and taking me to church. But I thought that my parents were overbearing and ignorant, they didn't know what this world is really like. They didn't know what I was going through because times had changed, and they were old and out of touch. But then you got this other adult who's also trying to influence me. And that's the cool guy on stage who's famous and everybody's cheering for him. And he's trying to get me to chant along with him about not giving an F word, But somehow his message seemed a lot more appealing to me than my parents did, because he was just telling me to do whatever I want, to do what thou wilt. And do what thou wilt is the great overarching philosophy that this new normal is hinged on. It's all about your identity. and your classifications and your social preferences, and just be yourself and do your thing and get yours and do you, and do it your own way and blah, blah, blah. And really, pretty much, it's just a reinforcement of the satanic motto, do what thou wilt. Just have as much fun as you can and experience as many pleasures as you can in your short time here on earth. Because when you die, you're just going to disappear, because that's what the kids of today are being taught. They're taught that life has no objective purpose, and that we're just mere animals on a tiny planet spinning around within a massive universe. And they are taught about sexuality, and how fun it is. And they watch these videos and demonstrations that previous generations would have considered pornographic. But I guess in 2021, we've already long since come to accept this type of so-called education. And not only are they conducting these hedonistic sex ed courses, but they're promoting it as a good and normal thing. And that it should never be repressed, because it's totally normal. Just do it safely. And here, take a free condom. But you know what I mean? And just watch the way that public education will follow in direct succession behind the media and the entertainment industry. Because the teachers, obviously, are not all members of elitist secret societies, who are knowingly participating in a manufactured agenda to indoctrinate the youth with a godless worldview. No, the teachers themselves are indoctrinated by the same propaganda that they teach, and that's the larger point, that this has been a procession, It's been a gradual progression, through the incremental corruption of generation after generation. We have finally gotten to a point where the children of today, who are predominantly influenced by the media and popular culture, are being raised by parents who were also predominantly influenced by media and popular culture. And even my generation was raised by parents who were predominantly influenced by media and popular culture. So this has been a long-winded and well-played agenda, indeed. Because now the kids are fully adapted to an existence that relies on media and popular culture to define one's social status. And we've built a technological prison around ourselves that will be inherited by this upcoming generation. And trust me, they're ready to accept those keys, because they have been trained to excel in this new world order. And then while we, as the grown-ups and the parents, are too busy being distracted by the bells and the whistles and the glitz and the glamour and the sex and the drugs and the rock and roll that we're constantly bombarded with, and all of this provocative entertainment that surrounds us, we seem to be forgetting that our precious little kids, who are so innocent and so impressionable, and so trusting and so curious, that our kids are falling victim to these same distractions. And as a father of 5, I can tell you, I can confirm the old cliche that they really do grow up too fast. They grow up so fast. And we cannot allow this fallen world to swallow up our children. And we need to be vigilant, because I know it's hard to believe, but we are witnessing a war on kids.
It's the blood, bleeding the blood.